So, some of you may have seen my previous Wonderlands analysis video, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it might even be what brought you to my channel originally. In that video, I tried to be as fair as possible given my experience up to that point, but it still seemed to lean heavily in the negative direction. It's also nearing the game's 1-year anniversary, and well, for some reason, I decided to try the game again after having not touched it for at least 5 months. And let's just say I had a much different experience. While most of my previous points are still valid, I must admit that the game has grown on me in my latest playthrough. That said, I hope you'll indulge me as I share my latest thoughts on this game after having revisited it. I will convey what the game is like with a fresh perspective, away from all the initial hype or hate, and with a new mindset. A mindset that I feel is necessary for myself in order to fully appreciate what this game has to offer. Let's get started. Okay, so first off, since I am already familiar with the story and the missions, I was able to focus almost exclusively on the mechanics and feel of the game. To maximize my chance of fun, I went with a white collar Stabo build, since they are arguably the strongest classes in the game. With no distractions or preconceived ideas of what to expect, I found myself really enjoying Wonderlands this time around. Once I got into the game proper, I focused heavily on enemy encounters, item drops, and overall gameplay mechanics. I took the time to read those novella-length item descriptions and actually tested out everything, even stuff I thought would be garbage. What a difference this made when compared to my original experience on the game's release. Okay, let's talk about the mechanics of this game. What do I mean by mechanics? Well, I personally define mechanics as how the game feels. Is combat fluid? Do interactions make sense? Is information conveyed to the player well? Is the gameplay repetitive, etc. For the most part, I would say this is something the game does incredibly well. It feels very polished overall, save for the conveying information to the player part, and I'll get to that shortly. Player movement and enemy encounters are actually enjoyable, especially if you're already used to Borderlands games. The sliding and mantling are fun and intuitive as well, and are effortlessly integrated into combat. Now let's talk about the highlight of the Borderlands franchise, the loot. While I still feel the launchers and snipers are just a token gesture and pretty much worthless, the other weapons feel very well suited to the new environment. They feel like they have a heft to them via the sound and animation effects, like they got some sort of weight to them. And I really like the magic barrels on some of the weapons that have the laser effects, or they'll increase the pellet count. And the spells took on a whole new life once I started trying them all out. The number of ways a spell can be cast is daunting and sometimes very specific to certain scenarios, but once you figure out that it is not a new form of grenade, but in fact its own class of weapon, the combat system really starts to open up and become a lot of fun. I used a dark magic sunder spell that sends elemental homing fissures towards enemies for almost my entire playthrough. It was very satisfying to cast and quite devastating to mobs. With it being dark magic, I was also able to get near constant lifesteal effect, which is pretty necessary at higher levels with tougher enemies. Speaking of enemies, let's discuss them and combat in general. In my original video, I mentioned I didn't think they were very unique and seemed to have poor AI. And while most of them do actually just resort to swarming the player as their main attack strategy, the variabilities of enemies is way more impressive than I originally noticed. Even trash mobs seem to include a balance of ranged, melee, and magical attacks. You will never think, oh great, more of these dudes during your playthrough. There are a lot of interesting and well-themed enemies that help players get immersed in the environment, and are great for keeping the gameplay fresh during a campaign run. Luckily, there are only a few enemies that are really annoying to fight, like the elite crab dudes and the Cyclops eye thingy that pops out when you kill them. But for the most part, the enemies were really well thought out and didn't overlap much in terms of similar attacks or mechanics. Also, I would like to just commend all the voice acting work in this game. It is absolutely god tier, and the skeleton dudes alone are worth listening to on their own playlist. They are hilarious and sound exactly what I picture a skeleton sounding like. And somehow, despite not having a huge range of lines, the Demi-Lich companion is absolutely priceless in this game and never seems to get old with its dialogue. Well, let's just get to the 800-pound wyvern in the room. The Chaos Chambers. A source of many complaints from the community, myself included. Again, it's not exactly the quality of the endgame that was an issue. The problem was that there was just nothing to do in the endgame besides the Chaos Chambers. So after doing many Chaos Chamber runs, I am still not in favor of them, but mainly because of two reasons. One, I hate roguelike games, and that's essentially how the chambers are structured. You die too many times, you get nothing, and you have to start over. The mobbing sections never prepare you for the final bosses, so you could be doing well, then all of a sudden get wrecked because your build isn't strong enough. Now you just wasted 15 minutes and have nothing to show for it. It's not fun at all, but that is on me though, and that is how I view roguelike mechanics. And number two, this is the only form of endgame content and only serves to help you get better gear to do more Chaos Chambers. What sense does it make to get good weapons only to bring them back into the Chaos Chambers? No. We still need a takedown or slaughter shaft added to this game. There's just no way around it. That said, I did actually gain a better appreciation for the Chaos Chambers and understand a bit of what I think Gearbox was trying to do with them. I've always liked the idea that you have to earn your way to the next highest chaos level. I just wish there was something else to aim for besides better gear. I do, however, love the puzzle aspect of the chambers, and being able to get secret raid bosses out of them is a great feature, and I definitely need to call that out. Okay, so all this I've been on about sounds great. But there are some things I still dislike after this revisit. Earlier I mentioned that I was looking at how well the information was conveyed to the player, and it must be said, it's probably one of the things I still really dislike from my latest playthrough. In fact, I might even dislike it more now that I've focused on it so much. What do I mean by conveying information to the player? Well, let me ask you, what do you think every time you see a red barrel in any video game? Exactly. That thing is going to explode if I shoot it. The environment tells you what to expect without you having to blow yourself up to find out. Wonderlands absolutely drops the ball on this, in my opinion, and it really skyrockets the frustration factor. Take, for example, what is arguably the longest and most rage-inducing fight in the game, Dragon Lord. Holy crap, what a nightmare this fight is, especially on your first few encounters. There's absolutely no indication of how to handle Bernadette when she shows up. Most of the time it seems like both of them are immune to any attack, and you just run around like an idiot trying to avoid adds and random elemental pools of death until eventually you see the health bar go down. It is so frustrating because there's so much going on it's hard to process without dying 10 times, and at that point I can't be bothered. Again, that is the thing. It might just be me because I have almost no patience at all, but I also find it very frustrating is because it seems like a very cheap mechanic. It seems like they're literally throwing almost anything at the player just to see how many obstacles they can put in front of you, and not to really make it a cohesive fight. If I haven't thrown my controller across the room, I have shut the game down in rage just from it being so obtuse. It's not fun dying to him only to have to start that 10-minute fight all over. When he shows up in the Chaos Chamber runs, I usually just save quit. My sanity is worth more than those crystals, really. Honestly, nearly all the boss fights have some sort of issue with this. If it's not conveying the information to the player, there is artificial difficulty added to a lot of the fights that just seem to be random ways to piss players off. For example, the fight with Drill is particularly agony-inducing from having only a postage stamp-sized area of land to stand on, while being inundated with enemies that have shield-shredding attacks, to Drill being able to hit you from nearly anywhere with no escape from his splash attacks. It's not challenging, it's just frustrating and not remotely fun. Even though not part of the main game, one major issue I and many others had was just how terrible the post-launch content ended up being. Probably one of the best examples of poor information delivery involves trying to complete the fourth mirror. In it, there is a section that is so poorly constructed that I had to look up a tutorial just to see what was expected of me. There were no indicators on the map, there were no objectives, and it used terminology which made no sense. It was so frustrating that I thought for sure I had somehow glitched it and would need to reset the run, but I had already spent so much time on it, I didn't want to go through it again. After about 15 minutes of trying everything I could think of, it turns out I had to set banners or flags on fire to spawn more enemies before I could progress. There was absolutely no indication of that to the player, and they called the flag standards or something, which just seems so incredibly odd to me. There are a lot of other issues with the mirrors, but stuff like this is just unforgivable in modern game design. To the credit of these mirrors, I will say that each successive mirror was more in-depth and interesting than the previous one. They weren't a total disaster like I originally felt upon their release. And oh man, can we just say that the environments, not just in the mirrors, but in every single area of the game, were absolutely beautiful and made every playthrough worth it on its own. Seriously, take a look at the skybox when you're in any map, and you'll see the rest of the world over the horizon, which really helps with immersion and shows off a serious polish most games only wish they could achieve. I also think this game could be truly amazing if we were able to get a single quality of life patch just to address some issues that have been persisting since launch. Namely, the UI is terrible. It's clunky, obtrusive, and just not easy to read or understand quickly. It was way more form over function, and I kinda hate it. With the 1 year anniversary in a couple days, I'm hoping for an official patch from Gearbox, but also am looking forward to what Epic NNG and the fellow mod squad can do with the Wonderlands REDUX mod set to release on the same day. This and other Borderlands titles owe a huge debt of gratitude towards the modding community, so be sure to check that out. Links in the description. So overall, I had a great experience on my second playthrough of Wonderlands, equipped with a fresh mindset and new attitude. Instead of me thinking this was going to be Borderlands 3.5, I let it show me the game it was trying to be, and this significantly improved my overall enjoyment of Wonderlands. If you were on the fence or just didn't like Wonderlands initially, maybe consider giving it another shot, but with a new perspective. Let the game show you how it's unique, and it will also show you why it's different from every other game in the franchise. I said it in my last video, and it has to be said again. Wonderlands got a lot more right than wrong. That opinion has only solidified after my latest playthrough. While still far from perfect, the good parts of this game are going to help make Borderlands 4 the best game in the franchise, and I cannot wait until its release. In the meantime, I now have another game to help me get through the Borderlands drought, which is never a bad thing. Thanks for watching, be well, and happy farming. And looking forward to what Epic NNG and the fellow mod squad can do with the Borderlands. Oh fuck.